So, have you been wanting to write a book, but you're just not getting it done? Well, in today's episode, I'm going to share with you 3 methods to finally get that book written. Let's get started. Hey messengers, welcome to the Market Your Message Show. I'm your host, Jonathan Milligan, and author of the book, Your Message Matters, How to Rise Above the Noise and Get Paid for What You Know. In today's topic, we're going to actually dive into this idea of how to find the time to get that book written. How are you going to find the time to get that book written? You know, there's a statistic, a recent survey that was done that came back. I think they surveyed millions of people, and it came back that 81% of those surveyed said they want to write a book. But do you know what percentage of people actually ever write a book? It's actually less than 1%. And the reason why that's so is currently out on Amazon, there's roughly 6 million books available. And there's 7 or 8 billion people in the world. So less than 1% actually ever write a book. Think about that. 81% of people have a book in them. 1% ever do. I hope to change that. And I want to give you some inspiration and some practical ideas today, because I'm going to be sharing with you 3 book writing methods that are going to help you finally get that book written. But before we get into those, maybe you're wondering, Jonathan, I don't even have a presence online. I don't even know where to start. Well, if that's you, then I strongly encourage you to download this 9-page guide. We've had thousands upon thousands of people get this guide, and it's basically going to walk you through how to discover your message. It's called the Discover Your Message Blueprint, and it's going to help you figure out and answer the 3 primary things you need to ignite your message. That's purpose, people, and passion. So if you want to get started, just go to marketyourmessage.com/discover and get that guide today. All right, so we're going to get into this topic. What are you going to discover today as we get into this? Well, we're going to be talking about what the, actually, it's back here. Sorry, I'm over on my YouTube channel and I'm clicking on scenes because we're recording this live if you're listening to the podcast, and I'm hitting the wrong buttons. But I want to talk to you about the 30-day Kindle book writing plan and how it works. Also, I'm going to talk about why you should never write your book from front to back, and how to use the 10-80-10 book writing technique, and much, much more. All right, so let's just jump right into it. Method number 1. This is the method I used in the very beginning. So here's the story. Back in 2014, I really wanted to write a book. And I just kept saying for 2 years that I was going to write a book. I'd started a blog in 2009. 2012 came. I said, I'm going to write a book this year. Didn't do it. 2013 came. Didn't do it. Finally, in 2014, I said, I've got to write this book. So how can I break this down to make it absolutely a no-brainer to do? And the method that I created for myself is what I call the 30-day Kindle writing plan. Now, this strategy is just to help you write a Kindle book. We're talking Kindle-only book. We're not talking about turning it into an actual physical book or paperback book. We're talking about getting your passion on Amazon in the form of a Kindle book. And so what I determined was I did a little bit of research and discovered that your average Kindle-only book runs around 10 to 15,000 words. Okay? Just for comparison's sake, I think my latest book is somewhere around 60,000 words. The book, the other self-published book I wrote is around 50,000 words. So your average regular book, we're talking nonfiction, is going to run around 50,000 words. So a 10 to 15,000 word book is much smaller, but that doesn't mean it's any less significant, especially as a Kindle only book. So here's what I determined. How could I do this? How could I write at least a 10,000 word book in 30 days? And so the step-by-step that I did was I said, you know what? At the time, I'd been blogging for a few years, and the average blog post was about 500 words. So then I said, okay, if I were to write one 500-word blog post a day, and I did that for 20 straight days, that would give me 10,000 words. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to write 500 words a day in my book for 20 days. And then I've got 10 days to edit it, to create a book cover or have a book cover designed and upload it and get it on Amazon. And literally, I went from procrastinating for 2 years to having a book that was on Amazon in 30 days. I've taught this technique to thousands of people in our Kindle Your Passion program, and it works. All right. Now, you might have a bigger book in you, then expand it. But if you're struggling, there's nothing wrong with publishing a smaller book to package your knowledge and story into a 10 to 15,000 word book. And typically you're looking at selling that anywhere from $2.99 to $5.97. I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're getting thousands of downloads, it can absolutely add up for sure. And it's a great way to just get started. So that's method number one. If you're just really struggling, that's where I started. Okay, method one, the 30-day Kindle writing plan. All right, what's method number two? Method number two is the Repurpose content plan. Now, this method is perfect for those of you out there who've already been creating. You've already been creating if you currently have a blog. You've already been creating if you have a podcast, if you've done YouTube videos, if you have been a speaker and you've recorded your speaking sessions, if you're a teacher and you've taught, if you have Zoom sessions where you've coached others, all of that is fair game. If you've done webinars, you can use that. So if you've used any kind of content, repurpose it. So that's what I did for my first, I would call kind of major book project, was the self-published book that I did in 2016 called The 15 Success Traits of Pro Bloggers. And this book was a Kindle book, a physical paperback book, and an audio book. So you can create 3 income streams, and it was all self-published. It was all through Amazon. And so what I did, now this took me about 4 months, but here's the big secret. 50% of the content in my self-published book came from blog posts. So what I did was I said, what is the topic I want to cover? And it's my methodology, my framework for how to take something you're passionate about and turn it to an income generating blog. And then after I figured out what those were, I created the chapters. And then I said, as I looked at each individual chapter, I said, where have I created content about this topic? Oh, wait, I wrote this long blog post about building an email list. So I copy and paste that into my book writing software. Then, okay, where have I talked about creating an online course? Okay, here, let's use some of this. And before I knew it, out of the 50,000 words, I had around 25,000 words or so that actually came from content I've already produced. And so you might be thinking, Jonathan, will people still buy a book if the content's available for free? Yes, because we pay for convenience. You see, it'd be really hard to string all those random blog posts into a coherent step-by-step plan unless you were reading it from the book. This is a technique that many authors have used. In fact, I went to a publisher friend I know, and I said, hey, how many of your clients have actually used this technique I'm talking about or thinking about using? You know what he told me? Some of you might know a popular Christian artist called Mark Batterson. And he sent a text to Mark Batterson and asked him. And Mark replied back and said, you know what? A lot of my content is a blog post first. I test my material with my audience and I get feedback and I see what resonates. And so the point is, if you've already been creating content in some format, think about using this plan, the Repurpose Your Content plan. That means if you're currently a pastor and you want to write a book, what about your sermon notes? What about transcribing your actual sermon and at least starting from somewhere? You probably, if you're watching this or if you're listening to this, you've probably been creating more than you think. And you can totally 100% use that to create a body of work that people can use and follow. All right. And then let's get to method number 3. That's the 10-80-10 book writing technique. 10-80-10. Now, I'll be honest, I've not used this technique yet, but the closer that I've gotten to what I would call the bigger players in the book writing industry, this is what they use. All right. So the 10-80-10. And I'll give you 2 kind of quick stories about how this works. The first one is a couple years ago, I heard about John Maxwell, who is somebody he has well over 30 some books, maybe more over the years. It seemed like a book a year's coming out. And I got wind a couple years ago that he was doing a 1-day writing conference. Like, interesting, it was actually his first ever conference about writing books. Most of his conferences are about leadership techniques and, managing people and developing leaders. And so I wanted to be there. So I went there, and this was the big aha that I walked away with. John Maxwell doesn't write every word of his book. He uses something called the 10-80-10. And what that is the front 10% is he figures out the hook, he writes and creates the outline, he's collecting stories and illustrations. He has this file catalog system of remembering stories or grabbing stories. And then he takes that project and hands it over to someone who's considered a ghostwriter, but they know John Maxwell's style very, very closely. And they put that into a book, a rough draft formula. And then John comes back in and makes sure it's his voice, make sure the last 10% is how he would probably say things, do a little bit of editing and changing of things, and the book gets published. Another person who uses this same strategy is Michael Hyatt. If you've been following Michael Hyatt, you've probably noticed that he's got a book coming out a year, sometimes 2 books a year. He's using the same philosophy. He created, with his team, his writing voice. It's like a document that takes his personality writing style, and they deconstructed it on paper. And then he has somebody who's very close to him that's been working with him for years that takes all of the initial parts of the idea behind the book, right? The outline, the hook, a little bit of understanding of where he wants each chapter to go. And then the rough draft is being created by his book writer. Then he comes back in, massages the text that's already there, makes it his own, and the book moves on. So, like I said, I've not used this technique. When I wrote this book, it was a much longer process, the Your Message Matters book. It was with a publisher. We went through about 7 or 8 or 9 rounds of editing. It was very intense. I probably spent a good 8 months writing the book before I ever handed it over to the publisher. It was a lot of work, right? But now that it's here, this is a work that I can talk about for the next 5 to 10 years. And that's the beautiful thing of getting your book written, because now you'll become an established authority, somebody who's taken a decade of experience and put it into one book that somebody can glean knowledge from and insight in the matter of 4 to 6 hours. Pretty incredible, right? That's why I love books so much. So there you go. Those are the 3 tips, the 3 methods. So again, method 1, the 30-day Kindle writing plan to just get your story out into the world. Number 2 is the Repurpose content plan. What content do you have laying around that you're just not using? And then finally, method 3, the 10-80-10 book writing technique. All right. So I hope that was helpful. I hope that encourages you. I hope that gives you a little bit of an idea of a method you could potentially use to move forward and finally get that book written. Again, if you're just getting started and you're like, I don't have a presence online, I don't even know who my audience is just yet, Jonathan, then I encourage you to go to marketyourmessage.com/discover and grab our Market Your Message or Discover Your Message Blueprint. This 9-page guide will walk you through some of the most important questions you need to go through to finally get your online presence started. All right. And also, what would you like to hear from me on future episodes? And please take a moment right now and rate, like, review our show. And never forget that your message matters.